As our disruptive software soared, the company's creator found myself a solitary commander confronting aimlessness after my lifelong battle unexpectedly ceased. The city lights of downtown looked like a scattered handful of diamonds on black velvet. From my office on the 17th floor, the world seemed quiet, orderly, deceptively peaceful. Inside, the silence was even louder. The last of my team had just left their cheerful goodbyes, still echoing in the minimalist space I'd come to call a second home. Or maybe, if I'm being honest, my first. The lingering scent of pepperoni and cardboard from the celebratory pizzas was the only thing left of the small party we'd thrown. It wasn't a wild blowout, just 6 people, my entire team sharing a few beers in a genuine sense of exhausted triumph. We'd done it. A month ago, the world found out. But tonight, it finally felt real. I walked over to the floor-to-ceiling window, my reflection a faint ghost against the glittering skyline. 28 years old. That's what the ghost in the glass was. Elijah Alvarez, founder and CEO of Alvarez Solutions. It still sounded like I was playing dress-up in my father's suit. But the name was real. The company was real. The seed funding was very, very real. Our software didn't just launch, it flew. The press called it disruptive. Investors called it a sure thing. For the first time in a long, long time, I felt like I could finally breathe. This office, with its polished concrete floors and its sleek, glass-walled conference room, this was the finish line. This was the trophy. But a trophy is a cold thing to hold at night. I looked around the main workspace. 6 empty desks, each one a testament to a person who had bet on me when I had nothing but a crazy idea and a dangerous amount of coffee. Maria, my lead coder, who once fixed a catastrophic bug at 3 in the morning from her kid's hospital room. Ben, my marketing guy, who spun a narrative of success long before we actually had any. They believed. And tonight, we celebrated. I saw the relief in their eyes, the sheer, unadulterated joy. For them, this success meant security, validation, a future. For me, it meant all of that. But it also meant the end of the war. I was a soldier, standing alone on a silent battlefield, not quite sure what to do now that the fighting was over. The solitude wasn't new. It had been my constant companion for the last year and a half. 18 months, 547 days. I'd counted them. Not intentionally, but they had etched themselves into me one sleepless night at a time. This project, this company, this dream, it wasn't a job. It was a crucible. It demanded everything. It took my time, my money, my health, and it took the life I had before. I ran a hand over this cool surface of the main conference table. 18 months ago, this table didn't exist. This office was a fantasy. My headquarters was a cramped spare bedroom in a 3rd-floor walk-up, the air thick with the smell of stale coffee and overloaded circuits. I was 26 and I had this idea burning a hole in my brain. An idea for software that could streamline a process everyone in my industry hated. It was ambitious. It was complicated. Everyone I pitched it to said it was impossible for a one-man shop. So I decided I wouldn't be one. I would build a company, Alvarez Solutions. I remember the excitement of those first few weeks. It felt like I had a secret, a key that could unlock the world. I'd code for 18 hours straight, fueled by pure adrenaline and cheap energy drinks. The world outside my little room just faded away. And in the beginning, she was there. She'd bring me a plate of food, her brow furrowed with a mixture of concern and admiration. She'd rub my shoulders tense and nodded with stress and tell me she was proud of me. We had a life then, before Alvarez Solutions became the only thing on my mind. We had lazy Sunday mornings with a newspaper spread out on the floor. We took long walks in the park talking about everything and nothing. She was my anchor. She was the part of my life that wasn't about algorithms and user interfaces. She reminded me that there was a world outside my own head. But a fire, even a brilliant one, consumes whatever is closest to it. And I was on fire. The project grew more demanding. The initial excitement gave way to the brutal, grinding reality of building something from nothing. The stakes got higher. Every dollar I had went into servers and software licenses. I stopped seeing friends. I missed birthdays, weddings. I'd be at dinner with her, but my mind would be a million miles away, debugging a line of code in my head. She would be telling me about her day, and I'd nod and say, but I wasn't really listening. She started to pull away slowly at first. The concerned looks were replaced with frustrated sighs. The shoulder rubs stopped. Our conversations became arguments. "You're never here, Eli," she'd say, her voice tight with a pain I was too absorbed to fully appreciate. Even when you're sitting right next to me, you're not here. And she was right. I had become a ghost in my own life. The company was a black hole pulling everything I loved into it. I saw it happening, but I was caught in the gravity of my own ambition. I kept telling myself, just a little longer. Once I get past this next milestone, then I can make it up to her. I made promises I couldn't keep because every time I crossed one finish line, a new, more distant one appeared on the horizon. The memory of it all felt so vivid standing here in the silent office. This place was the physical manifestation of the choice I had made. Every sleek chair, every powerful computer was a brick in the wall I had built between my old life and my new one. I had chosen the grind. I had chosen the solitude. I had chosen the dream over the person who had shared my bed. I didn't know how to have both. Maybe a better man could have. I walked to my personal office at the corner of the floor. It was just as sparse as the rest of the space. A desk, a chair, a whiteboard covered in future plans. This was my sanctuary and my prison. After she was gone, there was nothing left to pull me away from the work. There were no more dinners to miss, no more plans to cancel. There was only the code. The solitude became absolute. It was a year of monastic devotion to a digital god subsisting on vending machine snacks and a burning fear of failure. It was the hardest, loneliest, most miserable year of my life. And it was the year that made all of this possible. I sank into my chair, the expensive leather sighing under my weight. I looked out the window again. The city was beautiful. My name was on the door. I was a success. I had won, but standing on top of the mountain, I couldn't help but remember what and who I'd left at the bottom. The pride was real, but so was the ache. An echo in a house I'd built just for me. I had everything I thought I ever wanted, and I had absolutely no one to share it with. That feeling, that hollow ache of solitary victory hung in the air like a fine dust. It settled on the polished concrete floors and the glass walls that separated me from the glittering, indifferent city. My team, the small band of brilliant, sleep-deprived engineers who had helped me drag this dream into reality, had gone home an hour ago. We'd had a small celebration. Pizza on paper plates, a bottle of decent champagne sipped from coffee mugs. We'd toasted to Alvarez Solutions, to version 1.0, to the seed funding that meant we could all finally get a real paycheck. It was everything I had worked for, a moment of triumph. But triumphs, I was learning, are quiet things when there's no one to witness them. Once the last back was slapped and the final "see you Monday" echoed down the hall, the silence that rushed in was deafening. It was a rich man's silence, I guess. The kind you buy with 18-hour workdays and a year and a half of your life. The hum of the server bank in the other room was the only heartbeat in the space besides my own. It was the sound of my success, a low, constant, mechanical drone, a lullaby for a man who had forgotten how to rest. I leaned back in my chair, the one I'd spent way too much money on because someone told me it was an investment in my posture. It felt less like an investment and more like a throne in an empty kingdom. My eyes traced the clean lines of the office, the minimalist furniture, the stark white walls. It was a space designed for focus, for efficiency, for creation. It was not a space designed for living. There was nothing personal here. No framed photos on the desk, no goofy souvenirs from a vacation I never took. The only art was the company logo, crisp and professional, mounted on the wall behind the reception desk I could see from my door. My name, Alvarez Solutions. It was supposed to feel like an accomplishment. Right now, it just felt like a brand. I picked up my phone from the desk, its screen dark and reflective. I saw my own tired face staring back at me. 28 years old, but with the shadows under my eyes of a man much older. I had promised myself this would be the night I'd relax. The night I'd finally turn my brain off, go home to my empty apartment, and sleep for 10 straight hours. But the engine inside me, the one that had been running in the red for so long, didn't have an off switch. I was still thinking about bug fixes for version 1.1, still mapping out our hiring strategy for the next quarter. The solitude wasn't a reprieve, it was just a different kind of work environment. I was scrolling aimlessly through old emails, a pointless habit, when the phone vibrated in my hand. The buzz was sharp, sudden, and it made me jump. It was late. I wasn't expecting any messages. My team knew not to bother me unless the servers were literally on fire. My family, well, that they had mostly learned that I'd get back to them when I could, which was rarely. For a second, I thought it was a news alert, Another tech blog picking up the story of our launch. But it wasn't a banner notification. It was a text message, a green bubble from a number not saved in my contacts. My heart didn't sink. It didn't leap. It just stopped. For one solid second, the world went completely silent, the hum of the servers fading into nothing. Because I didn't need to have the number saved. It was a sequence of 10 digits I had typed 1,000 times. A number I had called in the middle of the night just to hear her voice. A number I had stared at for hours after the breakup, my thumb hovering over the call button, my pride and my pain wrestling for control. A number I had finally painfully forced myself to delete from my phone a year ago as a pact with myself to move on. Claire Ruiz. It had been exactly 1 year, 12 months of radio silence, not a word, not a happy birthday, not a Merry Christmas, nothing. A clean break, that's what she'd called it. A necessary amputation so we could both heal. I was the one who had argued against it. I was the one who had pleaded for another chance for her to just wait a little longer. But she had been resolute. She had walked out of my life and the silence she left behind was absolute. Until now. My thumb trembled slightly as I unlocked the phone. The screen glowed, illuminating the message preview on my lock screen. 3 words. Just 3 words sitting there under a number I knew as well as my own. My mind raced, trying to predict what they could possibly be. An apology. A mistake. A wrong number text sent after a year of nothing. My brain was trying to find a logical explanation, a way to protect itself from what I knew was coming. I tapped the notification, the message thread open. It was a barren wasteland, a digital graveyard. The last messages were from a year ago. A flurry of desperate texts from me, pleading, bargaining, apologizing, and then her final soul-crushing reply, the one that had ended it all. I can't do this anymore, Eli. Goodbye. After that, nothing. A blank white space representing 365 days of my life. 365 days of grinding, of failing, of getting back up, of finally succeeding. And now at the very bottom of that empty space were her 3 new words. I'm still waiting. The air left my lungs in a quiet whoosh. I read the words again and again. I felt a strange sense of vertigo, as if the floor of my sleek, successful office had just dropped out from under me. The words didn't make sense. They were a fragment of a conversation we never finished. A conversation I thought was long dead and buried. Waiting. Waiting for what? For me to call, for me to come crawling back? The arrogance of it was staggering. She was the one who left. She was the one who couldn't handle the struggle, the uncertainty, the sacrifice. She was the one who had looked me in the eye and told me that my dream was a nightmare for her. She had made her choice. She had chosen a life without me in it. A life where she didn't have to compete with a computer screen for my attention. I stood up and walked to the window, the phone clutched in my hand like a piece of damning evidence. The city lights blurred into a smear of gold and white. My reflection was a faint ghost against the glass, the phone glowing in its hand. The man in the reflection was the CEO of Alvarez Solutions. He was a success story. He was the guy who had just been featured in a major tech journal. He had done it. He had achieved the impossible thing he'd set out to do. But the text message wasn't for that man. That text message was for the guy from a year ago. The desperate, broke, exhausted guy who was terrified of failure. It was a summons from a past I had fought tooth and nail to escape. I'm still waiting. The words echoed in my head, and with them came a tidal wave of memories. Not the good ones. Not the lazy Sunday mornings or the walks in the park. No, this text dredged up the sludge, the fights, the tears. Her ultimatum. The sight of her packing her things, her movements cold and efficient. The final click of the door as she left my old cramped apartment for the last time, leaving me alone with my laptops and my impossible ambition. And then a new thought pierced through the emotional chaos. A thought so cold and sharp it felt like a shard of ice in my gut. The timing. It wasn't a coincidence. It couldn't be. For 1 year there had been nothing. For 12 months I had apparently ceased to exist for her. But now, 1 month after the press release about our funding, 1 month after my name started appearing in headlines that had nothing to do with failure and everything to do with success, now she was waiting. The illusion shattered. The faint lingering hope, I didn't even know I was still carrying the hope that maybe she missed me, the actual person evaporated in an instant. The text wasn't a lifeline. It was an invoice. It was a claim ticket. It was the message of someone who had placed a bet, walked away from the table, and had come back to cash in after seeing her horse had crossed the finish line in first place. She hadn't been waiting for Elijah Alvarez, the exhausted, obsessed, terrified dreamer. She had been waiting for the CEO of Alvarez Solutions. She had been waiting for the success I had achieved, not in spite of her leaving, but because of it. Her departure had been the catalyst. It had removed the last distraction, the last tether to a normal life. It had forced me to go all in because there was nothing left to lose. I had poured all the energy I would have spent on our relationship into the code. Every ounce of love, grief, and regret had been transmuted into fuel for the company. I looked down at the phone again. The three little words glowed back at me, taunting me with a future that could have been a future she had willingly abandoned. The peaceful, lonely pride I had felt just minutes before was gone. It had been replaced by a churning mix of anger and a strange, bitter clarity. The ghost that had been haunting my success story suddenly had a name, and it had just sent me a text message. My entire world, which for the last year had been about building, creating, and moving forward, was suddenly being dragged backward with the force of a tow cable. The quiet of my office was no longer peaceful. It was charged, tense. The past wasn't the past. It was right there in my hand, demanding an answer, demanding a piece of a victory it had done nothing to earn. My fingers were frozen over the keyboard of my phone. The screen felt impossibly bright in the dim office, illuminating a ghost from a life I no longer lived. I'm still waiting. 3 words. That's all it took to unravel a year of carefully constructed peace. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the quiet hum of the server room down the hall. And then I wasn't in my new office anymore. The sleek glass and brushed metal dissolved, replaced by the peeling paint and flickering fluorescent lights of my old apartment. The memory hit at me with the force of a physical blow. It was exactly 1 year ago. I was 27, running on 4 hours of sleep and 3-day-old coffee, staring at a screen full of code that refused to compile. The air was thick with unspoken tension. Claire, who was 26 at the time, stood by the door with her coat on. She wasn't yelling. It would have been easier if she was. Instead, her voice was calm, detached, like a doctor delivering a terminal diagnosis. I can't do this anymore, Elijah. I remember turning away from my monitor, the red error messages blurring in my tired eyes. Can't do what? Just give me 1 more week. I think I'm about to break through this bug. She let out a short, bitter laugh. It wasn't a sound of amusement. It was the sound of something breaking. That's what you said last week, and the week before that. There's always 1 more bug, 1 more feature. I'm dating a ghost who lives in a laptop. She gestured around the tiny apartment at the whiteboards covered in diagrams and the empty energy drink cans. This isn't a home, it's a launch pad, and I'm tired of waiting for a rocket that might never take off. That's when she laid it all out. The ultimatum. It was simple, clean, and absolutely brutal. Me or the project. My life with her or this all-consuming obsession that was Alvarez Solutions. She said she wanted a partner, not a roommate who only spoke in programming languages. She wanted a future she could count on, not one based on a venture capitalist maybe. I looked from her face, the face I had loved for years, to the screen which held the architecture of my entire future. I couldn't abandon it. It wasn't just a project. It was a part of me. I tried to explain, to make her see the vision I saw so clearly, but my words were just noise to her. She saw risk. I saw destiny. She shook her head, a sad finality in her eyes. I guess that's your answer. And she left. The click of the lock behind her was the loudest sound I had ever heard. The year that followed was the hardest of my life. I wasn't just broke, I was shattered. There were moments I was so close to giving up, where I'd lie on the floor of that apartment, convinced she had been right, that I had thrown away the best thing in my life for a fantasy. I lived on instant noodles and cheap coffee. I sold my car to pay for server costs. I missed weddings, birthdays, holidays. My world shrank until it was just me and my laptop. The loneliness was a physical presence, a cold weight in the room that never left. All that struggle, all that sacrifice, I did it utterly alone. There were no encouraging texts from her, no phone calls to see if I was okay, just a profound, deafening silence. And now this text. I'm still waiting. The memory faded and I was back in my new office, the one with the panoramic view of the city, the one her disbelief had ironically helped me build. A cold clarity returned, sharper and harder than before. She wasn't waiting for me. She'd walked out on that version of me, the 27-year-old dreamer, buried in debt. She had weighed his potential against his reality and found him wanting. Her text wasn't an olive branch, it was an invoice, a bill for the emotional support she never provided, sent to the 28-year-old CEO whose name was suddenly worth something. She wasn't trying to reconnect with the man I was. She was trying to claim a share of the man I had become in the crucible of her absence. I unlocked my phone, my thumb hovering over the reply button. I started typing the words flowing out in a torrent of frustration. Waiting for what? Claire, for me to finally be convenient for you, for me to be successful enough for you. Where were you when I was living on ramen and sleeping on the floor? You didn't wait. You left. You made your choice a year ago. I looked at the paragraph on the screen. It was honest. It was raw. And it was a complete waste of my energy. Giving her that explanation would validate her premise that there was still a conversation to be had, that she still had a claim on my emotional landscape. She didn't deserve to know about the struggle. She had forfeited the right to that knowledge when she walked out the door. You don't get to see the behind-the-scenes footage of a movie you walk out of after the first 10 minutes. I deleted the entire message. Cruelty felt cheap and my success wasn't about revenge. It was the result of my own grit and my own sacrifice. She gave me an ultimatum a year ago, a simple binary choice. The project or her. Her text was an attempt to rewrite history to pretend that ultimatum was just a pause button. My reply had to be just as simple, just as final. It had to be the sound of a door clicking shut forever. My fingers moved with a new kind of certainty. I typed 2 words, 2 simple words that contained the entire weight of the last year. They held all the lonely nights, all the crushing doubt, and all the quiet triumphs. They were the conclusion to a chapter she had started, but I was finishing. I'm not. I stared at the words. It was perfect. Not angry, not emotional. It was a statement of fact. She was waiting. I was not. Her world was anchored to a past I had moved on from. My world was moving forward. With a profound sense of release, I pressed send. The little blue bubble popped up on the screen, a definitive period on our story. I felt a weight I didn't even realize I was still carrying lift from my shoulders. It was the weight of her judgment of my own lingering what-ifs. And it was gone. I placed my phone face down on the desk. It didn't matter if she replied. The conversation was over. I stood up and walked over to the glass wall of my office. On it, in clean silver lettering, was the logo for Alvarez Solutions, my name, my company. A symbol of everything I had built, not on the wreckage of my past, but on a foundation of my own making. The victory wasn't proving her wrong. The victory was in this room. It was in the team I had hired and the product we had launched. The real victory was realizing that my success and my happiness were no longer dependent on anyone else's approval. I turned off the lights, the office plunging into a comfortable darkness, illuminated only by the glow of the city outside. I walked out not as the man she had left behind, but as the man who had finally truly left her. I was free, and I was just getting started.